But it wasn't the inheritance that broke me, it was my 13-year-old son's question that night. Mom, do we need her to be happy? If you've ever had to choose between peace and people who say they love you, this story will show you how I finally broke free, not with anger, but with clarity. The sterile hum of machines had become background music to Lauren's sleepless thoughts. For 72 hours, she hadn't left the cramped space beside her son's ICU bed. Her body ached from the stiff final recliner, her eyes burned with exhaustion, and her mind spiraled endlessly around one haunting question: would Aiden wake up? 12 years old. Just 12. And now tubes ran into his arms, monitors blinked in solemn rhythms, and a ventilator breathed for him, mechanical inhales and exhales filling the space where his laughter should have been. She had replayed the moment 1,000 times. Aiden's excited face at breakfast, asking if he could ride bikes with his friends on the first real warm spring day. She had checked his helmet, reminded him to text when he got there, kissed the top of his curly head, and now just like that she was here. Waiting. Powerless. Terrified. The door creaked slightly as the nurse Susan stepped in with a fresh chart and a gentle smile. Still, no changes, she murmured, checking Aiden's vitals. But stable. That's something. Lauren nodded, her voice beyond use. She reached for her son's hand again, still warm, still here. The only anchor she had in a sea of panic. Then her phone buzzed. It startled her, she hadn't heard it in hours. She fumbled to answer, recognizing the name flashing on the screen. Mom. Lauren came, the clipped, authoritative voice of Deborah, her mother, ever composed, ever demanding. I need you to come by the house tomorrow afternoon. Vanessa's birthday dinner starts at 6 and there's still so much to do. The caterer needs confirming, the centerpieces arrived late, and I want you to help with the table settings. Lauren's mouth opened, but no sound emerged at first. She stood and stepped just outside the room as if distance could soften what she was about to say. Mom, I can't. I'm at the hospital. Aiden is still in critical condition. He hasn't woken up. I can't leave him. A pause. And then the voice on the other end shifted, becoming sharp and cold. Lauren, there are doctors and nurses there. You sitting by his bed doesn't change anything, but your absence at Vanessa's birthday will. You know how sensitive she is, and frankly, you owe us better. Lauren clenched the edge of the doorframe. Owe you? We've helped you more than you ever acknowledged, Deborah snapped, and if you're not willing to show basic family support, then perhaps we need to reconsider some of the support we've given you. Including the trust fund for Aiden's education. The words hit like a slap. Not just the threat, but the ease with which it was delivered. As if her son's life-threatening injuries were a minor inconvenience compared to napkin colors and seating charts. I can't believe you're doing this right now, Lauren whispered, her voice cracking. Aiden could die, and you're talking about party planning and leverage. I'm talking about loyalty. Deborah replied, family. Expectations. Don't make this more dramatic than it needs to be. We've given you enough slack, Lauren. It's time you gave something back. Lauren stared at the hallway wall, the floral wallpaper peeling at the corner of the corridor. She had always known her mother's love came with conditions. It had been that way since childhood, affection given when she was useful, withdrawn when she wasn't. Vanessa, the golden child, the perfect pianist, the honor student, she had always fit the mold. Lauren, with her B+ report cards and love for photography, had never been enough. But this was different. I'm not leaving my son, she said, voice now steady. Not for a birthday party. Not for you. Not even for the money you dangle over our heads. There was a beat of silence. If you hang up now, Lauren, Deborah said slowly, don't expect anything else from us. You make your choice, just know what it costs. Lauren's breath caught. And then clarity. I already have. She ended the call. For a moment, she stood motionless in the hallway, the weight of 35 years of conditional love collapsing like a house of cards. Inside the ICU room, Aiden's chest rose and fell with mechanical regularity. Susan glanced up as Lauren stepped back, in her face full of unspoken concern. Everything all right now, Lauren answered, her voice hoarse but firm. But maybe it will be. She sank back into the chair beside her son, reached for his hand again and whispered, I'm not going anywhere, Aiden. No matter what it costs. The night deepened around them, but for the first time in days, Lauren didn't feel like she was drowning. Her world had narrowed to this room, this child, this moment. And in that stripped-down reality, she discovered something fierce and immovable inside herself. Something that had always been there, just waiting for the right moment to rise. Long after the call ended, Lauren sat frozen in the plastic recliner, Aiden's small hand wrapped in hers. The words still echoed not just her mother's threats, but the deeper, more familiar message beneath them. You are not enough. You have never been enough. It was a message she'd known long before she could name it. Long before the ICU, before the accident, before motherhood had reshaped her soul, Lauren had been a child searching for approval in a home that only had room for one star. Vanessa. Even her name had a kind of sparkle to it. Vanessa was 3 years younger, but seemed decades ahead in grace. From the moment she could walk, she danced. From the moment she could speak, she sang. And from the moment she touched a piano, it was as though she were born to perform. Lauren, by contrast, was quieter. Bookish. She loved animals and took pictures of shadows on the walls, fascinated by how light could be both beautiful and fleeting. But in the home Deborah curated like a showroom, messiness, literal or emotional, was unacceptable. The living room always smelled like eucalyptus and fresh lemons. Family dinners were arranged like catalog spreads. Deborah called it maintaining standards. Lauren called it never breathing fully. And whenever Lauren tried to step into the light, whenever she brought home a school project or tried out for the soccer team, her mother's praise was always couched in critique. A B+. That's fine, I suppose, but Vanessa just got an A+ in algebra and still found time to practice piano for 2 hours. You might try managing your time better, or, that's a cute drawing, Lauren. But maybe next time you could try to color inside the lines, like Vanessa does. Like Vanessa does. The refrain of her childhood. Vanessa never gloated. She didn't need to, she was simply adored. And in that adoration, Lauren was invisible except when she failed to measure up. Her father, gentle, kind-hearted, was the only buffer, though even he seemed to orbit around Deborah's moods like a satellite locked in gravitational pull. Your mother just wants the best for you, he'd say when Lauren cried quietly in her room after another scolding. She's hard on you because she believes in your potential. But belief shouldn't feel like punishment. Lauren learned early that love in her household had terms and conditions. If you performed well, if you made things easier, quieter, neater, you were seen. If not, you were tolerated at best, corrected at worst. One memory surfaced so vividly it felt like she was back there 10 years old, holding a third-place trophy from a regional soccer tournament, cheeks still flushed from the sun and excitement. She had run into the kitchen, trophy held high, beaming. Deborah had barely looked up from frosting Vanessa's cake. "Oh, you didn't win," she said, glancing over. "Well, I'm sure you tried your best." Lauren had swallowed the hurt, standing there in muddy cleats as her sister's perfect pink cake towered on the counter like a silent reminder. Only first place matters here. Years later, when she got her acceptance letter to a state college, after months of struggling through SAT prep while working part-time, she'd brought it home like a peace offering. Vanessa, at the time, had already been accepted early into an Ivy League music program. Community college first, Deborah had asked with a thin smile. "Are you sure that's the right path?" "It's practical, I suppose." That word again. Practical. Deborah used it the way others might use disappointing. Still, Lauren persisted. She found part-time jobs, scholarships, and somehow herself. Photography became more than a passion, it was a language she spoke fluently. Through the lens, she could frame a world where softness was celebrated, imperfection was beautiful, and every subject mattered. Then came Nathan. The only man who had ever looked at her without comparison in his eyes. He saw her work before he saw her. A friend had posted one of her photographs online, a candid portrait of a child hugging a rescue dog at the local shelter. Nathan had left a comment, "This moved me." And something about that simple honesty, unadorned, unprompted, was enough to spark something real. He was calm where she was anxious, steady where she was storm. He listened. He remembered small things. And he never once asked her why she wasn't more like anyone else. When she brought him home to meet her parents, Deborah had eyed him skeptically. "A soldier," she'd said with a raised brow. Doesn't exactly scream long-term stability. Lauren had replied. He's a systems engineer too. He's going into military intelligence after graduation. But the judgment had already passed. The wedding was small. Deborah wore navy instead of a more traditional mother-of-the-bride color, muttering criticisms about the venue, the catering, the simple white dress Lauren had saved 6 months to afford. Nathan had simply held Lauren's hand and whispered, "This day is about us. No one else." And for the first time in her life, she believed that was enough. Lauren blinked back to the present. Aiden's vitals still blinking in gentle rhythm beside her. She looked at her son, his bruised face, the soft flutter of his lashes, and felt a wave of fierce protection rise again. She would not let him grow up believing love had to be earned. She would not let him internalize the idea that affection came with achievement, that worth was conditional. He would know he mattered always. Because Lauren had learned the hard way what it meant to live under a microscope of disappointment, she would break that pattern even if it cost her everything. She reached over and smoothed a stray curl from Aiden's forehead. "You don't have to win first place for me to be proud of you," she whispered. "You just have to be you." Somewhere deep inside, a piece of the little girl she once was exhaled for the first time in years. College was Lauren's first breath of freedom. The campus wasn't grand or ivy-covered, but to her it felt like stepping out from behind a curtain that had hidden her true self for too long. She rented a tiny off-campus studio with creaky floorboards and water stains on the ceiling, but she loved it with a fierceness that surprised even her. No more lemon-scented perfection. No more tiptoeing around judgment. For the first time, she was alone with her thoughts, her choices, her mistakes, and her camera. Photography had always been a quiet passion, a world she retreated into when reality felt too sharp. As a teenager, she'd saved up allowance money to buy a second-hand DSLR, hiding it under her bed like contraband. She'd roam the neighborhood snapping pictures of peeling paint on fences, forgotten shoes on sidewalks, the hush between footsteps and memory. In those quiet frames, she saw things others overlooked. Moments that weren't loud but true. At school, she took every photography elective she could find. She volunteered at the local animal shelter, capturing adoptable pets in soft lighting that made strangers want to bring them home. Her professors noticed her eye for intimacy, the way she made even ordinary scenes feel sacred. Lauren was finally beginning to believe she had something to offer. Not a title, not a trophy, but a way of seeing the world that was hers. That was when she met Nathan. She first noticed him in the campus coffee shop, hunched over a thick engineering textbook, an untouched latte cooling beside him. There was something grounded about him, something unhurried. She'd seen enough performative ambition to recognize authenticity when it sat quietly across the room. Their first conversation started over a dropped lens cap. He'd picked it up, made a corny joke about photographers needing to tether their tools, and she'd laughed, really laughed for the first time in weeks. Nathan was steady, curious, and deeply kind. He asked questions that didn't end in judgment. When she showed him her portfolio, he flipped through each photo, slowly pausing to really look. "You make stillness feel alive," he'd said, and something inside her softened at the simplicity of it. He wasn't flashy, he didn't boast. But he listened. And when he spoke about his plans, completing his engineering degree through the ROTC program, then serving as an intelligence officer, he did so with clarity and purpose. Lauren had never felt safer with anyone. Telling her parents about him was another matter. She waited until winter break to bring him home, a calculated gamble. The holiday decor might soften her mother's edges. It didn't. A soldier, Deborah had asked, narrowing her eyes over the rim of her wine glass. "You're dating a soldier." "He's also an engineer," Mom Lauren replied, keeping her voice measured. "Military intelligence. He's got a 5-year plan and it's solid." "I'm sure it is," Deborah said with that familiar clipped tone. "But Lauren, be practical. Military life isn't exactly conducive to stability. What happens when he's deployed? When you have children, are you prepared for that? He's not just a uniform." Lauren snapped before she could stop herself. "He's a person. And he's the first person who's ever seen me for who I am." Her father tried to mediate, he always did, but the tension remained. Deborah was polite to Nathan's face, but her disapproval lingered in every sigh, every forced smile. Lauren made her choice anyway. They got engaged the summer before graduation in a quiet field just outside town. No flash mobs, no grand gestures. Just Nathan on one knee holding out a ring with a nervous grin. "I don't have a mansion," he'd said, "and I don't know where the military will take us. But I know I want to build everything I can with you." Lauren said yes before he finished the sentence. The wedding was modest. A borrowed church hall, fairy lights strung across folding chairs, a simple white dress Lauren had bought secondhand and altered herself. Deborah arrived with a designer shawl and a face set like stone. She criticized the flowers, the buffet, the music. But Lauren didn't hear it. Because Nathan's family showed up, and they showed up full. His parents, Sheila and Walter, brought warmth that was unfamiliar but instantly welcome. They hugged her without hesitation, gushed over her photographs, and called her our girl before the vows were even exchanged. His younger brother gave a shaky but heartfelt toast. His grandmother kissed Lauren's cheek and said, "Welcome to the family, sweetheart. We've been waiting for you." She hadn't known how starved she was for that kind of love until it was given without condition. After the reception, as she and Nathan sat together in the dim back room sipping lukewarm coffee, Lauren whispered, "I don't think I've ever felt so chosen." "You are chosen," Nathan said, kissing her hand. "Every day. Over and over." They moved into a small base apartment after he deployed for training. Lauren began picking up freelance photo gigs, weddings, newborns events while holding down part-time work at a local school office. The pay wasn't much, but it gave her structure, a reason to keep moving forward while Nathan was away. When Aiden came into their lives, pink, wriggly, and fierce from the start, Lauren's world changed again. He had Nathan's curls and her green eyes. And from the moment he was placed in her arms, she knew she'd never seek her worth in anyone else's reflection again. Deborah came to the hospital, of course. She brought gifts, advice, a flurry of suggestions. But Lauren had already learned to filter her mother's voice, keeping the pieces that mattered and letting the rest fall away. It was Sheila who sat with her during those early days, who brought soup and folded laundry and told her, "You're doing amazing, honey," even when Lauren was too exhausted to answer. In those quiet moments, something healed in her. Not all at once, not completely, but enough to recognize a new kind of family. One that didn't demand perfection. One that offered presence instead of performance. For the first time, Lauren felt like she belonged, not because she fit a mold, but because she didn't have to. And that she realized was the difference between being tolerated and being loved. It was a Tuesday when they came to the door. Lauren remembered the sound of Aiden's laughter bouncing off the walls as he ran down the hallway with a blanket tied around his shoulders like a cape. She was folding laundry on the couch, tiny socks, school polos, the soft t-shirt Nathan had mailed her from his base in Kandahar. Outside, the world looked deceptively calm, spring wind, birdsong, sunlight pooling on the porch. Then came the knock. 2 officers. Stiff uniforms. Heavy expressions. The folded flag. Lauren couldn't hear their words at first, just a dull ringing in her ears, a thunderous silence that swallowed sound. Her knees gave out before she registered the phrase "killed in action." It felt surreal, absurd. How could someone so solid, so constant, just disappear? Nathan was gone. She was 29. A widow. And Aiden, only 5, couldn't understand why Daddy wasn't answering his bedtime video calls anymore. Grief wasn't just a wave, it was an ocean. It pressed into every corner of her life. The silence in the apartment was louder than any siren. The bed felt too large, even the air seemed heavier without Nathan in it. At the funeral, Deborah wore black silk and a pinched expression of practiced sorrow. She cried at the appropriate moments. She held Aiden's hand during the service, squeezing it when the military bugle began to play. But her eyes remained dry when she looked at Lauren. After the last condolence was given and the church emptied out, Deborah leaned in and said, "You can't possibly stay in that apartment now. It's not suitable. You and Aiden should move back home." At first, Lauren hesitated. She knew the offer wasn't just kindness, it never was. But grief has a way of unraveling even the strongest resolve, and she was exhausted. Emotionally bankrupt. The idea of not being alone, of someone helping with Aiden even temporarily, was tempting. So she said yes. And just like that, she stepped back into the house of her childhood, not as a daughter, but as a dependent. The illusion of support didn't last long. "You're spoiling him," Deborah said a week later, watching Lauren cradle Aiden after a nightmare. "He'll never learn resilience if you coddle him every time he cries." "I'm not coddling him," Lauren replied quietly. "He just lost his father." "We've all lost," Deborah snapped. "Don't act like you corner the market on grief." From then on, everything came with strings. Deborah insisted on managing Aiden's schedule, his meals, his school, even his bedtime stories. She rewrote Lauren's grocery lists, signed her up for parenting workshops without asking, and subtly corrected her in front of Aiden. "You don't give him enough structure. You let him talk back. You're too emotional." Nathan would want better. Lauren bit her tongue again and again, telling herself it was temporary, that her mother was trying in her own warped way, that Aiden needed family, but inside she was crumbling. Each day felt like reliving childhood with the volume turned up, the same subtle jabs, the same manipulation veiled as concern, the same constant erosion of confidence. When Lauren started working part-time at a local school as an administrative assistant, Deborah barely masked her disdain. "A desk job, you had so much potential. If you'd pursued a master's like I said, you wouldn't need to settle for scraps now." "I'm doing what I can to support my son," Lauren said calmly. By letting him grow up in scarcity, Deborah's words were a dagger. "You should have married someone with a future, not a soldier." That was the moment Lauren finally looked her mother in the eye and saw not disappointment but control. Deborah didn't just mourn Nathan's absence, she saw it as an opportunity to reclaim Lauren. "You want obedience, not partnership," Lauren whispered that night as she lay awake staring at the ceiling. "You don't want to help, you want to own us." She began quietly looking for an apartment. Something small, affordable, close to a good elementary school. The life insurance from Nathan wasn't vast, but it was enough to get her started again. When she announced the move, Deborah's fury came swift. "You're being reckless. You think pride is going to pay your rent, I think peace will," Lauren replied. "If you take Aiden away from this home, his family, you're being selfish." "No," Lauren said, packing the last of her boxes. "I'm finally being free." The apartment was cramped, the carpet was worn, and the windows stuck sometimes. But it was hers. Every corner, every squeaky cabinet was a reminder that she had drawn a boundary and kept it. Aiden adjusted quickly. He missed the backyard at Grandma's, but not the tension. They built routines, pancake Saturdays, movie nights with popcorn, bedtime stories that turned into conversations. Lauren enrolled him in a public school with kind teachers and a good counselor. She picked up freelance photography gigs on weekends, family portraits, maternity shoots, small weddings, and slowly began rebuilding both her identity and her income. But Deborah never let go. She'd show up unannounced with expensive toys Aiden didn't need. She'd tell him, "Mommy can't give you this, but Grandma can." She scheduled family outings that clashed with Lauren's time off, then accused her of being ungrateful when she declined. She used love like a transaction. And Lauren finally recognized the price. It wasn't money, it was herself. So she began saying no. No to last-minute visits, no to guilt-wrapped obligations, no to rewriting her life to fit her mother's script. It wasn't easy. Every no felt like tearing away a layer of skin. But with each refusal, Lauren stood taller. She was no longer the girl trying to earn love by being agreeable. She was a mother protecting her son from the cycle of conditional affection. And in doing so, she was learning finally what unconditional love looked like. Not in grand gestures, but in choosing herself. In choosing Aiden. In choosing freedom. Lauren first noticed it in the little things. The way Aiden hesitated before asking for a new notebook even though his was tattered and half full. The way he'd glance at the price tag on cereal boxes before putting them into the cart. He never said it outright, but she could see it in his posture, in the small, deliberate ways he tried not to take up space. He was 8 years old, and already he'd learned to worry about money. It wasn't coming from Lauren. She'd been careful not to pass on her own anxieties. She talked about budgets like puzzles, not burdens. She let him help plan their weekly meals, praising his logic when he swapped pasta night with grilled cheese to stretch the cheese longer. She never used the word poor. But Deborah did. It started after a weekend visit. Aiden returned quieter than usual, pushing peas around his plate while Lauren told him about the local library's new science exhibit. She mentioned they'd go see it on Saturday, maybe grab hot chocolate afterward. Aiden shrugged. We don't have to. It's okay if we don't have enough money. Lauren froze spoon halfway to her mouth. She set it down. Where did you hear that? He blinked at her, confused. Grandma said we're poor. She said. If you'd married someone with a real job instead of a soldier, we'd have a house like Aunt Vanessa's. The air left Lauren's lungs. It wasn't the first time her mother had said something like that. But hearing it filtered through Aiden's gentle voice, his wide, innocent eyes, was something else entirely. She scooted her chair closer and took his hand. Aiden, she said carefully. Do you feel like we don't have enough? He considered. We don't go on trips like the twins do, and Grandma said we don't eat fancy food, but I like our food and our apartment. She smiled though her heart ached. We have everything we need. We have a home, we have school, we have each other. That's not poor, that's rich in all the ways that count. He nodded. So, it's not true. It's not the whole truth, she said gently. Some people think money is what makes you valuable. But Daddy didn't believe that, and neither do I. He brightened a little. Daddy said real courage isn't loud, it's steady. She hugged him tightly. Exactly. From that day forward, Lauren started redefining wealth at home. Not as a pointed lesson, but as a quiet celebration. They created a gratitude wall, sticky notes of things they appreciated, from sunny mornings to warm socks. They made Science Museum Saturdays a tradition, packing peanut butter sandwiches to save money and turning the train ride into part of the adventure. And Aiden thrived. He had Nathan's curiosity, always asking questions about how things worked. He loved robotics, space documentaries, and anything with circuits. His bedroom became a mini lab littered with LED lights and solar kits. He was also astonishingly kind. When a classmate forgot their lunch, Aiden offered half of his sandwich without hesitation. When a younger kid tripped in the hallway, he crouched beside them until a teacher arrived. His teachers often told Lauren he's the kind of boy who makes the room better just by being in it. But even with all his light, there were shadows. Lauren noticed it again when Deborah called during dinner one evening. She ignored it, letting it go to voicemail, but Aiden looked up and asked softly, "Are you mad at Grandma?" "No," Lauren said, setting down her fork. "But we have different ways of thinking, and sometimes I need space from that." "Like a timeout," she smiled. "Kind of. Grown-up version." He nodded thoughtfully. "She says you're too sensitive, but I don't think that's bad. Sensitive means you care, right?" Lauren's throat tightened. She reached for his hand. "Yes, baby. It means you care. And it means you notice things other people miss. That's a gift, not a flaw." Still, the calls kept coming. Sometimes Deborah left long voicemails about opportunities Aiden was missing out on: a fancy summer camp, a private tutor, a holiday trip with the twins. Sometimes she'd show up uninvited, gifts in hand, and whisper things into Aiden's ear that made him retreat into himself for days. Lauren tried to talk to her, set boundaries. But Deborah always turned the conversation into an indictment of Lauren's parenting, her finances, her resentful attitude. And worst of all, she framed it as love. "I'm only trying to help," she'd say, pressing a check into Lauren's hand. "If you were a little more grateful, we wouldn't have these problems." Lauren wanted to scream. But instead, she folded the check, handed it back, and said quietly, "We're doing just fine." But the cost of fine was high. She could see it in Aiden's growing awareness. How he picked up on tension she tried to hide. How he started asking questions with guarded eyes. "Do people think we're different? Why don't you let Grandma help? Am I still allowed to love her?" Those last words shattered her. Lauren pulled him into her arms. "You are allowed to love whoever you choose, Aiden. Even people who hurt me. Even people I set boundaries with. But you don't talk to her much," he whispered. "Because I have to protect myself," she said. "And you. That doesn't mean I want you to feel torn." He looked at her, serious beyond his years. "I just wish everyone could be nice at the same time." She kissed his forehead. "Me too." That night she lay awake wondering how many other children carried burdens they didn't understand just because adults couldn't manage their own pain. She thought about her own childhood and the way Deborah's voice still echoed in her head some days. The pressure. The comparisons. The impossible standards. She didn't want that inheritance for Aiden. So she made a choice. She talked to the school counselor about enrolling him in a social-emotional learning group. She began limiting visits with Deborah to neutral public settings, always supervised. She blocked her number after 8 p.m. She told Aiden he could call Grandma if he wanted, but that Mommy needed rest during those hours. And she started therapy. Not because she was broken, but because she was healing. And she wanted to make sure her son inherited wholeness, not wounds. The ICU hallway was cold, too quiet. The kind of silence that didn't calm your nerves but sharpened them, like the pause before a scream. Lauren sat beside Aiden's hospital bed, her hands wrapped gently around his. His skin was warm, but his body remained still. Machines breathed for him. Monitors blinked steady patterns she'd learned to decode in the absence of answers. It had been nearly 72 hours since the accident. Lauren hadn't slept more than 30 minutes at a time. Her neck ached from the recliner. Her mind buzzed with questions no one could answer. Would he wake up? Would he remember her? Would he still be Aiden? She was halfway through whispering a story about the first robot they ever built together, how it had knocked over the cereal box and made them laugh so hard they cried when her phone rang. She flinched at the sound. The screen lit up. Mom. Her stomach tightened. For a moment she hesitated. Maybe finally her mother had realized the severity of the situation. Maybe she was calling to ask how Aiden was doing. Maybe Lauren answered, stepping just outside the ICU room so she wouldn't disturb the machines or Aiden's fragile sleep. Mom, she said, her voice hopeful despite herself. Thanks for calling. It's been so hard. I need you to come by the house tomorrow around 2. Deborah interrupted, her tone brisk. Vanessa's birthday dinner starts at 6 and there's still a lot to prepare. I told the caterer you'd help with the place cards and flowers. Lauren blinked, disoriented. I can't, she stammered. Mom, I'm at the hospital. Aiden is still in critical condition. He's in a medically induced coma. He hasn't woken up. There was a pause. Not the kind weighted with sympathy, but one filled with calculations. I understand, Deborah said, finally, her voice clipped. But the doctors and nurses are doing their jobs, aren't they? There's nothing you can personally do by sitting there all day. And your sister will be devastated if you don't show up. You know how sensitive she is. Lauren stared at the wall, barely able to process what she was hearing. I'm sorry, Vanessa will be disappointed, she said, trying to stay calm. But I need to be here for my son. Her mother's voice shifted, colder, now hard-edged. After everything your father and I have done for you, this is the thanks we get. You've relied on our support for years, especially after Nathan died. The college fund we set up for Aiden, the trust. Do you think any of that is guaranteed? Lauren's breath caught. Are you threatening to take away Aiden's college money because I won't leave him alone in the ICU to attend a birthday party? I'm simply pointing out that loyalty goes both ways, Deborah replied. Family obligations don't disappear just because you're having a crisis. If you don't come, I'll have no choice but to reconsider everything. It was a moment Lauren would remember for the rest of her life, not for what was said, but for what snapped inside her. She felt it like the quiet crack of a bone healing wrong. A lifetime of manipulation. Conditional love. Support that came with strings so thick and tangled they'd nearly strangled her. And now her mother was wielding her child's future as a weapon. For the first time, Lauren felt none of the familiar guilt. Just a cold, clear rage. Her voice came out low but steady. You want to know what I choose? Mom. Deborah said nothing, sensing a shift. I choose my son, Lauren said. Not your money, not your version of family, not your love that comes with conditions. I choose the boy lying unconscious in that bed. And if that means losing everything you've dangled over my head for years, so be it. Her mother gasped as if personally wounded. How dare you speak to me like this? Lauren exhaled. Her pulse slowed. I dare, she whispered, because I'm done begging for approval. I'm done explaining my worth, and I'm done exposing Aiden to a version of love that teaches him he has to earn it. She didn't wait for a response. Her thumb hovered for only a second before she tapped end call. The silence that followed was different now, liberating. She stood still in the hallway, the fluorescent lights humming above her. Her body was exhausted, but something inside her felt lighter. As if she'd finally dropped a weight she'd been carrying so long she'd forgotten what it was like to stand tall. Lauren opened her contacts, found Mom, and deleted the entry. Then she slipped back into Aiden's room. The machines beeped in their steady rhythm. His hand still rested in hers. Susan, the night nurse, looked up. "Everything okay?" she asked gently. Lauren nodded. "Not yet. But it will be." She sat down beside Aiden again and whispered, "I'm here, baby. I'm not going anywhere. No matter what." That night, for the first time in days, Lauren allowed herself to rest. Not because she was giving up, but because she had chosen something greater than survival. She had chosen clarity. She had chosen boundaries. And most of all, she had chosen love, the kind that protected no matter the cost. The hospital cafeteria was nearly empty when Lauren finally sat down with a sandwich she didn't want and a soup she couldn't taste. Outside the window, the world continued moving, cars pulling into parking spots, people laughing on the sidewalk, someone jogging with a dog in a bright red sweater. It felt obscene, almost, that life was allowed to keep going while hers had stopped 3 days ago with the ring of a stranger's phone call. She stared down at her tray, the food untouched, her thoughts looping on repeat. Did I just destroy Aiden's future? It wasn't her mother's voice in her head now, it was her own, soaked in doubt and desperation. The trust fund, the inheritance, the chance at a debt-free college education. All of it vanished with one phone call. With one act of defiance. Had she chosen pride over practicality, anger over stability? What if Aiden never forgave her for what she'd cost him? The thought tightened around her chest, like a vice. She dropped her spoon. And then her phone buzzed. She hesitated, afraid it was another guilt-laced text, but when she checked the screen, her breath caught. Miriam. Nathan's mother. Lauren answered quickly, her voice trembling. "Hi. Morgan told us what happened," Miriam said. Her voice was soft but steady. "We're booking a flight. We'll be there tomorrow." Lauren's throat clenched. "You don't have to, sweetheart," Miriam interrupted gently. "We're coming." "That's not a question. You're not alone in this." Lauren covered her eyes with her hand, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Thank you. We love you," Miriam continued. "Nathan loved you. And Aiden is our grandson. No matter what happens with your family, you always have us." "Okay," Lauren managed to whisper. "Okay." When she returned to the ICU, Kelly, the night nurse, was already at Aiden's bedside. "He's stable," she said, then studied Lauren's face. "But you're not." Lauren gave a weak laugh. "I just deleted my mother from my phone." Kelly didn't flinch. "Good." Lauren blinked at her. "I've worked in this ICU for 17 years, Kelly said. You can tell a lot about people when someone they love is dying. Some show up with casseroles and pity, others bring real presence. Real love. You're the second kind. That matters." Lauren swallowed hard. "It doesn't pay tuition." "No," Kelly said with a small smile. "But it's what brings people back to life." That night, Lauren sat by Aiden's side, whispering fragments of stories, robot jokes, bedtime songs they hadn't sung in years. She didn't expect a response, just didn't want the silence to settle too deep between them. Around 9 p.m., as she adjusted the blanket over his legs, she felt a twitch against her fingers. She froze. "Aiden," she whispered. Another twitch. Then stillness. Her heart thundered. She leaned closer. "Aiden, honey, can you hear me?" His fingers moved again, more purposeful now, a faint squeeze. Lauren gasped. "Kelly," she called out, unable to tear her eyes away. The nurse rushed in, her calm instantly transforming into focus. "It's okay. Let me get Dr. Patel. You stay with him." Lauren took Aiden's hand in both of hers. "I'm here, baby. You're doing amazing. Just stay with me." His eyelids fluttered. A breath caught in his throat, not the ventilator's rhythm, but his own weak attempt. By the time Dr. Patel arrived, the room buzzed with quiet urgency. "He's transitioning," the doctor murmured after examining the monitors. "This is promising. Let's reduce the sedation further and monitor responsiveness. We may be able to remove the ventilator soon." Lauren nodded, too overwhelmed to speak. 2 hours later, Aiden's eyes opened slightly, then fully. Lauren leaned in her hand, trembling in his. "Hey," she said, her voice a whisper wrapped in prayer. "You're safe, sweetheart. You're in the hospital. There was an accident, but you're okay. I'm right here." His gaze was dazed, but recognition slowly dawned. His lips didn't move much, too dry, too tired, but he mouthed something. Kelly leaned in, reading his lips. "He's saying something." Lauren bent closer, brushing his hair from his forehead. And then Aiden's whisper, raspy but clear. "You were right to stay." Lauren burst into silent sobs. She pressed her forehead gently to the side of his, clutching his hand. "Oh, baby. I never would have left. Never." Dr. Patel confirmed what they'd all hoped. Aiden was waking slowly but with clear neurological responses. There would be more tests, more steps ahead, but for the first time in days, hope felt real. Later, as Aiden drifted back into rest, Lauren stepped out into the hallway for air. Her phone buzzed again. Another text. This one from Jake's mom. "Made a casserole. It's on your doorstep. Also, if you need a ride to appointments next week, we've got you." Lauren stared at the message, overwhelmed. Her coworkers had set up a meal train. Her neighbor dropped off groceries. Nathan's sister had called to read a book to Aiden over speakerphone. Even Susan, the day nurse, had brought her a coffee with a post-it note, "Mom, warriors need fuel too." And in that moment, Lauren realized something profound. Family wasn't just blood, it was showing up. Sitting with you through the fear. Bringing soup. Holding your hand in silence. Whispering you were right to stay. The sun had barely risen when Lauren heard the knock. She looked up from Aiden's bedside, where he was still asleep, his hand tucked lightly in hers. The door opened a sliver, and Marcus, the new nurse on shift, peeked in. "Lauren," he said gently. "You've got visitors." Her stomach turned. It didn't take a genius to guess who had arrived. She stood slowly, her body stiff from another night in the uncomfortable hospital chair. She kissed Aiden's forehead and whispered, "I'll be right outside, baby." In the hallway, she found exactly what she expected. Her mother. Deborah. Dressed immaculately in a fitted cream blazer, pearls, and a shade of lipstick that matched the intensity of her scowl. Beside her was Vanessa, eyes red and puffy, arms crossed defensively. They looked like a coordinated guilt machine, wound tight and ready to perform. "We've been trying to reach you," Deborah said briskly. "Your phone's been off." Lauren kept her voice even. "I needed quiet." For Aiden. "Well, Vanessa cut in. We wanted to come yesterday, but with the party and everything." "The party," Lauren said slowly, "was not my priority." Deborah straightened her spine. "It's time we had a conversation, Lauren." "In private." "No," Lauren replied. Calm. Clear. "Whatever you want to say can be said here. But let's keep it short. I'm not leaving Aiden alone." Deborah's mouth pinched into a thin line. "Very well. We are your family. And regardless of what you think, we came to support you. But you owe us respect." Lauren tilted her head. "Respect is mutual. And it's earned." A flicker of disbelief crossed Vanessa's face, as if Lauren had suddenly started speaking a language neither of them understood. "This attitude," Deborah said sharply, "is exactly why you're alone in life. You alienate everyone who tries to help." Lauren took a breath. Then another. "And then, let me be very clear. You can see Aiden, but under conditions." Deborah blinked. "Conditions?" "Yes," Lauren said. Her voice didn't rise. If anything, it became steadier. "One person at a time. 5 minutes. No stress, no guilt, no talk about parties or inheritance or family obligations. Only encouragement. Only love." "That's ridiculous," Vanessa said. "He's our family too." "Then act like it," Lauren snapped, and for a moment her composure cracked. But she pulled it back. "He nearly died. I sat by his bed for 4 days while you planned photo shoots and floral centerpieces. If you're here now, prove you deserve to be." Deborah stepped forward. "You don't get to dictate." "I do," Lauren said firmly. "I'm his mother, his legal guardian. And right now I'm the only one who's been protecting him emotionally, physically, all of it. If you can't follow the rules, you don't see him." A silence fell. Cold. Dense. Electric. Finally, Deborah relented with a clipped nod. Fine. Lauren turned to Marcus. Please escort them one at a time. 5 minutes. If they step out of line, send them out. Marcus, clearly rooting for her, nodded with a small grin. You got it. Vanessa went in first. Lauren watched through the glass window in the hallway as her sister approached Aiden's bedside, stiff and uncertain. She showed him a photo of his cousins on her phone. Aiden smiled faintly. She didn't bring up the party. She didn't ask about the accident. She stayed safe, shallow, just enough to check a box. 5 minutes. When Vanessa stepped back out, she looked surprised, maybe even shaken. He looks smaller, she whispered. Tired. He nearly died, Lauren said flatly. Vanessa didn't respond. Deborah went in next. Her heels clicked sharply on the floor. From the hallway, Lauren watched her lean over Aiden, place a careful hand on his blanket. She said something. He didn't react much. Maybe nodded once. She kept her expression composed until she caught Lauren's eye through the glass. Then her face hardened like clay drying under scrutiny. When she stepped back out, her voice was low. You're making a mistake, Lauren. No, Lauren said. I'm finally making a choice. You think you're being strong, Deborah said, gathering her purse, but this cutting us out, pushing us away is childish. Ungrateful. Respecting my own limits isn't ungrateful, Lauren said. It's survival. Deborah's expression faltered just slightly. There will be consequences. There already were, Lauren replied. And I'm done living under the threat of more. She didn't cry, she didn't shake. And as her mother turned and walked away, the hallway didn't feel heavier, it felt lighter. That evening, Lauren sat beside Aiden again, brushing his hair off his forehead as he dozed. When he opened his eyes halfway and smiled, her heart ached with fierce love. Did Grandma come? He asked sleepily. Yes, Lauren said softly. And she followed the rules. He smiled a little. Good. Lauren chuckled. Yeah, it was good. Then he looked at her serious. You didn't let them be mean to you, right? Her breath caught. No, baby. I didn't. He seemed satisfied with that. His eyes fluttered closed again. As the monitors beeped steadily, Lauren leaned back in her chair and let the quiet settle, not the suffocating quiet of guilt but the calm of clarity. She had drawn the line. And it held. 2 weeks after Aiden's discharge, a certified letter arrived in Lauren's mailbox. It came in a stiff white envelope, her mother's law firm's insignia embossed in silver on the corner. She didn't open it right away. Instead, she placed it on the kitchen table, made tea, and watched Aiden build a small robot kit in the living room. His brow furrowed in concentration, tongue poking out slightly in that endearing way he'd had since toddlerhood. She sipped the tea slowly, the envelope staring at her like an accusation. But when she finally tore it open and scanned the legal language, there were no tears. Just a breath. A long, clean breath. She and Aiden had been officially removed from her parents' trust. All inheritance. All future financial support. Gone. It was framed, of course, in language that spoke of family estrangement and continued disrespect and incompatibility of values. Deborah's fingerprints all over it. But Lauren felt no sting. No panic, just freedom. For the first time, she owed them nothing. Not explanations, not performance, not presence. The transactional ties had been severed, and in their place stood something sturdier, self-respect. The next day, Vanessa texted. Can we talk? Lauren stared at the message, thumb hovering. Then typed back. Sure. Boundaries stay in place. Vanessa arrived at her apartment later that evening with store-bought cookies and tension in her shoulders. She looked tired, more human than usual. I didn't know Mom was going to do that. She started sitting stiffly on the edge of the couch. Cut you out like that? Lauren nodded. I figured. I mean, I didn't think she actually would. I thought it was just another threat. Vanessa hesitated. She's been impossible lately. Even more than usual. Lauren didn't respond immediately. She studied her sister's face, so familiar yet distant. I'm not angry, Vanessa, she said, finally. But I'm also not willing to pretend things are okay. Vanessa exhaled. I get that. I'm trying. Lauren offered a faint smile. Trying matters. But it doesn't erase years of silence or complicity. There was no venom in her tone, just truth. Vanessa winced but didn't argue. Aiden peeked out from the hallway, then shuffled back into his room. He hadn't said much to Vanessa since the hospital. Lauren knew he still harbored quiet confusion, maybe hurt. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry," Vanessa added, standing up. "For not being there when you needed family. I wish I'd been braver." Lauren stood too. "Me too." She didn't invite her to stay longer. She didn't offer closure. Not because she was angry, but because she'd learned that not all relationships deserved full reconciliation. Some only needed distance. In the weeks that followed, life settled into a new rhythm. Aiden returned to school part-time. His physical therapy appointments became routine, and the once frightening hospital halls turned into places of familiarity and progress. He joked again. He laughed. He asked deep questions about space travel and how prosthetics worked. He was healing. And so was Lauren. But her healing didn't come from family dinners or emotional apologies. It came from the people who had shown up. Cora, the receptionist at the school where Lauren worked, brought homemade soup every Thursday. Jake's parents drove Aiden to therapy when Lauren had late shifts. Mrs. Hale, the elderly neighbor from 2 floors down, watched Aiden for an hour each week so Lauren could shower in peace or take a walk. And then there was Marie, Nathan's mother, who flew in from Texas the moment Aiden was strong enough to sit upright. She didn't bring judgment or advice. She brought puzzles and books and stories about Nathan that made Aiden giggle. At night she would sit with Lauren, cups of sleepy time tea in hand. "You're doing beautifully," she said once as Lauren wiped down the kitchen counter. "You've done more with less than most people ever could." Lauren blinked away tears. "I still don't feel like I'm enough." "You've always been enough," Marie said gently. "Your mother just never saw it. That's not your fault." And that truth, the quiet, validating truth, filled Lauren with something Deborah's entire inheritance never could piece. One Saturday morning, Aiden handed Lauren a folded piece of paper. It was a drawing. Crayon and pencil. A house, small, bright, with flowers in the window. Inside were 2 stick figures, one tall with curly hair, like hers, one shorter with glasses. He'd labeled it at the top. "Home. Is that us?" she asked, her voice catching. "Yeah," he said. "I didn't draw Grandma and Grandpa. I didn't know if I should." She crouched down eye level. "You get to decide who's in your story, Aiden. Who your people are. Just like I did." He nodded solemnly. "I want the people who make me feel safe." Lauren kissed the top of his head. "Then you're already way ahead of where I was at your age." The holidays came and went quietly. There were no invitations from Deborah. No passive-aggressive texts from Vanessa. Just a few forwarded photos from her father, still caught in the crossfire, still trying to play both sides. Lauren didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because silence had become its own kind of boundary. A soft wall where old noise couldn't penetrate. Instead, she and Aiden made gingerbread cookies with Marie. They watched cheesy movies under thrifted blankets. They toasted hot cocoa to chosen family and built traditions from scratch. And on New Year's Eve, as fireworks bloomed in the sky beyond their modest apartment balcony, Aiden asked, "Do you think things will ever go back to normal?" Lauren looked out over the city lights and thought about all the ways normal had hurt them both. "I hope not," she whispered. "We're building something better." And Aiden, ever-wise, nodded like he understood. Because maybe healing didn't require fixing what was broken. Maybe it simply meant choosing what and who to carry forward. The living room smelled like cinnamon and candle wax. The cake was a modest one, chocolate with vanilla frosting, homemade, slightly lopsided, and decorated with a small plastic robot perched at the edge like a silent guardian. Aiden had requested it himself. "It's okay if it's not perfect," he'd said. "I like it better that way." Lauren couldn't argue with that. 13 candles stood tall and flickering, casting soft shadows across the table where hand-folded party hats sat waiting. No catering. No gift registries. No matching family outfits. Just real people, real laughter, and warmth that no inheritance could ever buy. Jake and his parents arrived first, bearing a second-hand telescope wrapped in old comic strips. Marie-Lauren's mother-in-law in every way but legal brought a handmade scrapbook of Nathan's childhood photos, each one carefully captioned with love. Cora came late, breathless and apologetic, with a box of brownies and a card that read, "To my favorite science kid, never stop building your future." There were no balloons emblazoned with luxury logos. No piano recitals to showcase achievement. But there was music, Aiden's favorite playlist, and a lot of dancing that would later be deemed embarrassing but secretly loved. As the sun dipped behind the city skyline, painting the apartment gold, Lauren stood by the window watching her son laugh. He had grown not just in inches but in soul. The scar on his arm peeked from beneath his shirt sleeve, a silent testimony to what he had survived. At one point, Aiden came up beside her, cheeks pink from laughter, eyes bright. "Can I ask you something?" he said, serious now. "Always," Lauren replied, turning to him. He hesitated, then looked down. "Do you think we need Grandma and Grandpa to be happy?" The question hung there, quiet and sharp. Lauren knelt beside him, brushing a hand through his curls. "No, honey," she said gently. "We don't need people who only show up on their terms. Family isn't about blood, it's about presence. It's about who stands beside you when everything falls apart." The people in this room, she nodded toward their guests, they showed up when it mattered. That's what real family looks like. Aiden seemed to think about that, then nodded slowly. "I figured," he said. "But I wanted to hear it from you." He leaned into her for a moment, resting his head against her shoulder, and Lauren closed her eyes to anchor herself in the weight of it. The smell of his shampoo, the faint sound of laughter from the kitchen, the flicker of candles behind them, this was her life. Imperfect. Unpolished. Entirely real. Later that evening, after everyone had gone and the dishes were soaking in the sink, Lauren sat on the couch with a cup of tea, legs tucked beneath her. Aiden flopped down beside her, his birthday crown slightly crooked. He held the telescope in his lap, already dreaming of constellations and far-off galaxies. "Do you think Dad would be proud of me?" he asked suddenly. Lauren didn't hesitate. "He'd be in awe of you," she said. "Not just because of what you survived, but because of who you are. You're kind, you're brave. You stand up for what's right even when it's hard. That's the kind of man your dad was, and that's the kind of man you're becoming." Aiden's smile was quiet but sure. "I want to make my own future," he said. "Even if it's different." Lauren swallowed the lump in her throat. "Then you already are." The next morning, she found a note on the kitchen counter, Aiden's handwriting, still half child, half young man. "Thanks for staying, Mom. For choosing me. I'll never forget that. Happy my birthday to us." She stood there for a long time, letting the tears come freely, not from grief, but from a fullness she hadn't known she could feel again. There were still bills to pay. There would be scholarship essays, long work weeks, and unexpected medical appointments. But there was no longer a war inside her. She had chosen Aiden. And in doing so, she had chosen herself. That evening, as stars began to pepper the night sky, Lauren brought out the telescope. She and Aiden stood on the balcony, wrapped in blankets, trading the eyepiece back and forth. "There's Orion," she said. "And the Pleiades." Aiden grinned. "You know what's cooler than stars? What? That we're made of the same stuff," he said, repeating something he'd learned in science club. "We're literally made of stardust." Lauren laughed, the sound rising like smoke into the sky. "Then I guess we're already light." And so their story didn't end with a party or an apology or a perfect picture of family unity. It ended with a birthday candle blown out on a slightly crooked cake. With a boy who had found his courage. With a woman who had finally found peace. And with a quiet promise that sometimes the greatest victory is not revenge, not rebellion, but the calm strength of living your truth when the world expects your silence. They didn't have the trust fund. They didn't have the mansion. But they had each other. And that was enough.